Where money rules the world, they march on. The capitals of capital have been occupied.
We don't need to change the system, the politicians. We need to change the political system.
Around the world, they have traded their homes for tents. If we are fighting against the IMF and ECB, then these are our Mubaraks. A global movement has emerged which doesn't want to pay for this crisis. It is outrageous that the young must now foot the bill. They question the system and fight against those who represent it. The response of the authorities: pepper spray.
Educate yourself. Take Business 101, Economics 101.
They call themselves the 99%. Their stories are the stories of outrage. I've never been in a party. I've never been to a demo before. It's the largest social movement in 30 years, and its spirit has yet to be broken. But can the protests on the streets really alter the course of the world? Should we really put capitalism in handcuffs? And should these indignant citizens be allowed to have an influence? Occupy Wall Street celebrates its 2-month anniversary with a march on the New York Stock Exchange, right up to the police barriers. The stock exchange traders are disrupted on their way to work.
So there's a nonviolent direct action. So people who are trained in nonviolent direct action are actually lying on the street, and they're going to be told that they are going to be arrested, and then they will proceed with that, like staying in that space.
48-year-old communications instructor Suzanne has been involved from the beginning of the Occupy Wall Street movement. She feels as though the movement is a liberation.
Finally, after so many years of people not saying anything, I mean, it just seemed like, one thing after the other in this country was so absurd, and then there was no response.
Suzanne is a trained mediator. She settles disputes amongst activists and local residents on behalf of the Occupy Wall Street movement. She also acts as a go-between when there are clashes with the police. It all started here in Zuccotti Park. Several cases of police violence have brought tremendous support for the movement. The whole world has watched incidents on the internet, like this pepper spray attack on peaceful demonstrators. The sleeping bags of a few dozen outraged citizens are transformed within a few days into a tent city. The camp is a reflection of society. Individual groups take responsibility for a hospital. A large kitchen offers 3 meals a day. There is a library, a press office, and a financial group managing the donations and proceeds from the sale of printed t-shirts and badges.
Much like having an office job in a mosh pit, it requires a lot of leg room to keep on top of receipts and, staying accurate.
Food is also being donated. Teleliberatos Pizzeria delivers up to 300 pizzas daily to the Wall Street protests.
They asked me if I have online ordering and if they could put my restaurant's phone number on their Twitter page to accept, deliveries on behalf of people, and I said, sure, why not?
They now get orders from around the world.
From all over the country, and we've had a lot of orders coming in from Europe, from England, Germany, Spain, Italy, Greece, and actually a couple orders from France.
The police have banned megaphones in Zuccotti Park. The response of the activists? A human megaphone.
Anybody would like to shower?
We amplify each other's voices.
We amplify each other's voices.
No matter what's said.
No matter what's said.
So we can hear one another.
So we can hear one another.
Hand signals of approval or rejection have been developed so that speakers are not interrupted by heckling. But the dream of the self-managed grassroots democratic tent city in the middle of Manhattan ended with the eviction of the camp. Only after a legal tug-of-war have the activists been allowed back into the park. At the entrance, it now says that tents are prohibited. Suzanne welcomes friends, asking who has been injured or arrested. She says that the evacuation of the camp was inevitable because of increasing internal tensions.
The whole meme of occupying, we had to transform it to our next step. I mean, that was important when we did it, but now we have to create something else.
Despite the cold and rain, the protesters are determined to stay.
It's not over. We'll last here until we're ready to leave.
The uprising of the protesters has not stopped with the clearing of the tent camp. Instead, the movement has continued to grow internationally. Frankfurt, the German financial capital, home to all major German banks. The European Central Bank now has to save the euro. In a park in front of the ECB, the Occupy Frankfurt movement has set up camp. About 50 protesters live here and are ready for the long haul. They use the Arab Spring as their model. What has been identified in Tunisia and Egypt and the Arab Spring is that history can be made from the bottom again. The squatters in Frankfurt prepare themselves for a long winter. The wooden pallets are designed as a tent floor because it's so cold outside. If we are fighting against the IMF and the European Central Bank, then these are our Mubaraks. These are the people who oppress us by imposing austerity regimes. The lines of connection are so clear that at any rate, I would say that there is a kind of mutual inspiration between our cause and theirs. In a disused military tent, the connection to the other 2,500 Occupy movements around the globe is kept alive. IT specialist Thomas Drillich keeps track. The IT unit was at home in my kitchen. I've also bought my own equipment. 2 computers in this room are also mine. But yes, most of it is donated. The main task here in the IT tent is to link the camp with the world. One of the most important issues is to build a team of interpreters to create links not only within Europe, but also internationally. Sometimes the European bankers come down from their buildings to where the protesters are. Usually they don't want to talk much, at least not in front of their colleagues.
Everyone can just say what they think about, so it's free to work hard and let's see what happens.
Just what will happen remains to be seen. Despite the difficulties, the protesters in Frankfurt are working against the power of the banks. It is the fight of David against the all-powerful Goliath. Stefan Hessel is the initiator of the indignant movement. His pamphlet, Outraged You, is in part directed against predatory capitalism. He was born in Berlin, was a member of the French resistance, survived the Buchenwald concentration camp, and was co-author of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The governments are now so inhibited by their debts that they cannot adequately defend themselves against these awful financial and economic powers. Therein lies the danger. This is what's causing people to be up in arms. In Greece, there is a new generation of outraged citizens. In no other country in Europe have they fallen as hard as here. The state is under the supervision of international financial authorities, and the outraged keep their position in front of Parliament on a daily basis. One of the protesters is Marion Chatzidamianos. He belongs to the network, Real Democracy Now! Marios and other outraged Greeks were forced to vacate their tents outside Parliament 4 months ago. Today they are emboldened by the fact that their protest is part of an expanding global movement.
We're trying to get inside the webpage that will actually connect us with almost 30 cameras from 8 countries, and most of them from the United States, because today in the United States is the US Day of Rage. So they're actually doing the same thing there, and we're trying to establish the live feeding.
The protest is no longer comprised of a few disgruntled leftists. It now has a broad base of supporters. Marion works as a mediator between many groups and interests, but also tries to maintain a common goal. Although there is no official leader, people like Marion help to coordinate the movement, domestically and internationally.
Simultaneously, all around the globe, we've established the same system because we were connected through the live feeding and webcams. So actually, we helped them and they helped us to establish this whole idea in terms of structure, ways of communication, and to bring the whole world down to the final question with this, which is actually if you are willing to take our faith in our own hands.
There are also people in Greece for whom the protests are taking too long. Angelos Sicaras is an entrepreneur traveling with 2 business partners. They consider the demonstrations to be inefficient and propose new ideas. They believe that potential is being lost through protests. For them, it's about creating more practical solutions.
Go back to our villages and start working to our farms, and when slowly companies will be created, and we will have a different economy will start. Also internet plus other innovative things. We can do things, and I believe that we can succeed because as people, I believe in Greek people. I believe in us.
Author and provocateur Gerald Hamm lives in Vienna. He thinks that the debt crisis can be overcome, but only through hard work. In his latest work, Antidote, he calls on young people to change the way they think about money. The 68 generation had a clear goal: no war, no weapons. When today's generation goes out to demonstrate, it has no objective whatsoever. In France, young people actually protested against the raising of the pension age, which in plain language means that they don't want pensions. Because if the pension age isn't raised, there will be nothing left over for young people. In other words, the people going into the streets should think first about what they want, not that the organisers of Occupy Wall Street know anyway. Gerald Hamm has made millions in real estate and the stock market. He likes to call himself an investment punk, not because he wants to rebel against the financial world, but because of the way he tries to benefit from it. The only way to fight back is for people to educate themselves economically, to become entrepreneurs and plan their careers properly. Today, many young people spend time relaxing, shopping, and accumulating debt. These things will not help you to be a winner, and it won't help you to be heard. For a long time, the Spanish have tried to get their voices heard. These scenes of celebration at the Carnival in Barcelona are now a distant memory. The younger generation is outraged, and rightly so. It's now clear that they will be worse off than their parents. A whole generation has lost faith in their future. People have flocked to this demonstration in Barcelona from all over Catalonia. They protest about youth unemployment, social division, and their distrust of an incompetent political elite. There are very clear demands. Firstly, the amendment of electoral law. The current electoral system is discriminatory. It gives small parties almost no chance. There is also high unemployment amongst the young, which must be tackled. Another point is the situation with homeowners who have lost their homes to the banks, but are still in debt. This must also be changed. The young were previously regarded as apolitical, but the crisis has forced them to act. Today, they feel that their dignity has been lost. The pressure of the financial and political situation has become too great, and despite all appearances, they don't feel as though they belong to society. Laugh about what depresses you has become their motto. When the protests on the street take a break, it continues on the internet, on places like Twitter, Facebook, and the blogs of the 99%. The 99% are putting their personal stories onto the internet because they are outraged that they should bail out the wealthy minority. The phenomenon of global protest is now being studied academically. Marion Hamm teaches at the University of Lucerne in Switzerland. She understands the codes of the global movement. The movies that are linked through Twitter and so on help to produce images that go around the world. And these images again go on to recreate the format and repertoire of the protests that make this movement recognizable in many cities on different continents. Like other places in Europe, grassroots cooperatives and collectives have been formed in Spain. They spring up for different reasons, often with local concerns, but also with wider, overarching ideals. Enric Duran is one of the leaders. He's part of an anti-globalization, anti-capitalist movement, which is linked to others around the world. Enric came to prominence with a sensational stunt. Between 2006 and 2008, he took out a number of loans with different banks, totaling almost €500,000, which he then distributed to anti-capitalist projects. The stunt earned him the nickname Robin Bank. He wants to use what he did to spark public debate. After my first arrest, I've gotten to know a new environment. I had the opportunity to talk with many people about their problems. After that, I established platforms and cooperatives, which aim to give people a fair chance. We're trying to create alternative models to the current economic system. The exchange of goods and services, the self-financing in health and education are the cornerstones of our reforms. Back in Greece, the outraged have given up trying to pay for the economic crisis and are trying to help themselves. Ioannis Sturgio doesn't want to pay the toll tax. They put temporary taxes on our income and also a property tax to our electricity bill, which we're not going to pay. And I don't think that all these taxes that they make us pay are going to save Greece. They need to find different political solutions for the colossal debt that we have. Activists of the I Do Not Pay movement have an appointment on the motorway. The so-called vain actions of these outraged citizens are now legendary. Whether it's motorway tolls, or a subway ticket, gas, water, or electricity. In many cases, they are no longer paying. They say that if the wealthy had paid their taxes properly in the first place, the state would not be bankrupt. This is a subject Iona knows a lot about. She works as a tax consultant and wants to prevent the middle class from footing the bill. We live in an area where we have no other way than to go through these national tolls, to go to our jobs, to take our children to school, and to go shopping. We need to go through these national tolls, which are very expensive. But we need the equivalent of 2 or 3 monthly paychecks just to pay for them. The police leave them alone. There's simply too many to arrest them all. Greece took part in a day of global action. It first started in Asia, continued in Europe, and reached its peak in North America. Hundreds of thousands of people are on the streets. They have no political power, but they are united with their demands.
Are we going to make a political stand that will take in the first place citizenship all over the globe? And after that, we will find out what kind of politics we want to deal with. Okay. But you need to understand that for the past 20 or 30 years, politicians all around the globe were under the influence of economical factors or business factors, and we never felt like there was a politics over for the people.
Since they cannot directly change big politics, they start at home. Every week brings together delegates from different districts in front of Parliament. Through their meetings and activism on the internet, they set up kindergartens, tutoring, care for senior citizens, and food for the poor. It is grassroots democracy in miniature. I think we have taken a long time to do something, and what we're doing now is very little. But I believe it will become bigger and bigger. I don't have an answer for tomorrow. We live now, and if we can change what happens now, the future will take care of itself. By the end of the day, there will have been nearly 1,000 arrests in New York. Things will be harder from now on. Zuccotti Park is cleared, and the last remaining stalwart is taken to hospital for hypothermia. These are the remains of the public library. The kitchen and the press center have also disappeared.
It's a work in progress. It certainly helps to have a physical space, but there are other ways that we will regroup and make ourselves stronger and continue the organizing. The ideas which Occupy Wall Street have put out into conversations around this country and also around the world, we are the 99%. Those ideas continue.
The sociologist Jeffrey Goldfarb shows his students how grassroots democracy took hold here.
I think actually it has had its greatest success. That means that it indeed put the question of inequality on the American political agenda.
The lack of leadership figures, the lack of clearly defined political objectives, the myriad issues raised. All this has not weakened Occupy Wall Street in light of the eviction. The challenge is now to find a way to rechannel the revolutionary energy. By the afternoon, Zuccotti Park is full of people. As the number of policemen in riot gear around the park increases, so does the tension. Suzanne, the communication coach from Brooklyn, tries to diffuse situations as a mediator. She fears that an activist on the tree could give the police reason to intervene. Shortly after, there are clashes with the police, and further arrests are made. Suzanne records the name of each detainee taken to jail, so that no activist gets forgotten in prison.
They called these the tombs because they're small jails in the basements, and people who have been arrested in the last 3 days are being held there, and they're slowly being arraigned and let out. So when they come out, we give them a big hug and give them lots of love and, you know, whatever they need emotionally, you know, we connect with them and just, you know, we support them.
It gets cold and dark at Zuccotti Park. It's the first General Assembly of the activists after their chaotic eviction. While they hold out in the rain, a few blocks further away, plans are being made for the future. Several activists meet in groups in the public foyer of a German bank, which is located directly on Wall Street. The tenacious Spanish youth are also fighting for their future. The crisis in academic life and the rigid austerity measures have led to the emigration of thousands of well-educated Spanish youth. The protesters formulate new goals, but there are fears that the government could move too quickly for them to implement their agenda. The disappointment in Spanish society can be heard everywhere. I find that the poor have to pay for something which they cannot afford. The ailing Spain is unlikely to meet the wishes of those who are outraged. The country is overwhelmed by an horrendous budget deficit, and the state has no money for social support. Job losses are often accompanied by the loss of housing, as many Spaniards have acquired their homes with credit. 500,000 families have lost their properties in recent years, with many being made homeless. If banks find themselves repossessing a property, they end up spending only 2/3 of the original purchase price. The buyer still owes the bank for the rest of the money. As a result, there are many people who remain indebted for life. You buy an apartment and have illusions that you can live a life of dignity, and yet we have nothing. The banks have thrown money at me, saying, "Don't worry, buy everything." But I have not taken more loans. Forced evictions have become a part of Spanish life in recent months. Activists across the country succeed again and again to stop hundreds of apartments being repossessed, at least temporarily. Most of the time, the eviction dates can only be postponed. We live in an increasingly global society. We no longer simply live in nation-states. The major problems we are faced with, the problems of poverty, the destruction of our planet, these are global problems. They need global efforts. Spain has looked on with interest at the global events of recent months. The movements across Europe and the United States have set new standards for political discussion. As the protests continue developing, changing shape and spawning further sub-movements, what's next for the outraged citizens of the global economic crisis?